welcome to China, to the town of Zhang, where we are watching the apparatus final of the Pacific Alliance competition. And the first gymnast up from USA is Bob Stelter, and Bob has completed his first tumbling run, and goes into his flexibility, side splits, then his strength move, a plunge, and Bob has a maximum of 70 seconds to complete his exercise as he prepares himself for the balance movement and finally his final tumble across the diagonal to finish his exercise. Round off back handspring, a double back somersault with a full twist in the first one, but lands heavily and steps out of the area, and he won't be very pleased with that. Quite a good exercise, full of difficulty, and goes back to his coach. And here we see the slow motion replay of the floor exercise, where he lands out of the area, and he will have a deduction in points for the final mark. And the next gymnast up from Canada is Lorne Bobkin. He starts his exercise with a very high back somersault in the tuck position, followed by an immediate front somersault. Coming on his second pass, a whip over, followed by a full twist and somersault, 1 1/4 front somersaults, 2 front lie. Very dynamic exercise, showing his flexibility, side splits, and he will press the handstand, and the handstand must be held for 2 seconds, changes direction, and works his way to the corner with a front somersault followed by another front somersault into a fine joining movement. Good choreography in this floor exercise, fine balance, no mistakes so far, and finishing with a back handspring and a double twist and just a slight adjustment on landing. Very good exercise. Looks a little tired as he walks off the floor area. Very powerful and dynamic jumping, these gymnasts who perform all these gymnastic movements in a short period of time. And as we watch the finish of the exercise, the double twist to finish. And here we have the next gymnast up from Korea, Park Jung-hong, and he starts with a round off back handspring followed by a double layout somersault, very difficult movement, and coming back across the diagonal with a round off back handspring, a half in back out, double back somersault with a full twist. Nice variation in the joining movements into the splits position. And now his strength, not quite holding the handstand there, a little bit overbalanced. Front somersault followed by another front somersault into the corner for his balance movement, a side lunge, taking a slight breather, preparing himself for the final tumble, which is a round off back handspring, double back somersault, and spots it very nicely. Quite a good exercise. He'll be well pleased with that routine here in the finals of this all apparatus competition in China. And there we see the finish of the exercise, the back handspring followed by a double tuck somersault. And there's the score, a 9.40 for the Korean gymnast. And now from China, we have Zhang Wei. And this is one of the hopefuls of the new China team, starting with the same exercise as the Korean boy, a back handspring followed by a double layout, a little bit short on landing. Now coming back across the diagonal with a 1.5 twist, followed by a double twist and immediate front somersault to front support. Now a combination of flexibility and his strength move, very powerful and precise, these gymnasts. Good style, very accurate. Front somersault, followed by a further front somersault, working his way to the corner. His balance part, and prepares himself for his final tumble, which is a round of back handspring and a tuck somersault, and he spots it beautifully and lands perfectly still. Very good exercise from this young Chinese gymnast. Zhang Wei performing his tumble for his finish. Very beautiful double back somersault to stand still. And he's quite pleased with that, and he scores a 9.625 for that floor exercise. That puts him in the medal contention. And the next gymnast up is Lai Jungyong from China. Beautiful double layout somersault to start the first tumble. And coming back across the diagonal with a front somersault, back handspring, double twist, and into his flexibility part, followed by a press to handstand, straight arms and straight legs together. Must hold this handstand for 2 seconds. Works his way across the mat to the corner, handspring, Barani, 1.25 front, 2 front support. Another press to handstand, a slight hesitation there on that press. A front balance, getting himself all set up for his final tumble. Double tuck somersault, steps slightly back, has to make that little adjustment at the end. Otherwise, quite a good exercise, just 2 slight errors. Seems quite happy with it. And here we see the slow motion replay, the back handspring, double tuck back somersault, and there we see that slight adjustment on landing. There he is talking to the other teammates about what he did wrong, and scoring a 9.4. He'll not be too pleased with that. And here we have the young Canadian boy, Jean-Jacques Laram. A new member of the Canadian team, this young boy, gaining experience here in the Pacific Alliance competition. And here we see his strength part, overbalanced and slightly. And working towards the corner for his finish, a double twist followed by immediate front somersault to land. Looks a little tired, a little wary. And here we see the slow motion replay of his start of his exercise. A double back somersault followed with a twist in the first somersault, landing slightly forward, and there's his score, a 9.1. He'll not be too happy with that result there. And the next gymnast up from Korea, slight adjustment on his first tumble. Fine combination there. And now going into his balance. Very beautiful handstand, difficult with the arms out the side. And this fine gymnast from Japan, Nakayo Terio, finish an exercise with a 9 double tuck back somersault. And here we see the final tumble, the double layout, just undercutting a little at the end. Very good exercise, he'll be pleased with that. There's his final score, 9.35, and the final result is Zhang Wei from China, the gold medal, Bobkin, Canada, Park Jong-hong from Korea, getting the bronze medal. Here is Mark Morrison. Mark, a fine young gymnast, and displaying some fine pommel horse work here. The gymnasts have to perform on all three parts of the horse with swings of double leg circles and pendulum swings, and moving from one part of the horse to the other. And there's Mark making a slight mistake in the middle of the exercise. He won't be happy with that. And there's his coach. And as we see the slow motion replay, we can see these fine Thomas Flair gymnastic elements displayed here, moving from the end of the pommel up to handstand and finally finishing. We didn't see the mistake earlier on in his exercise where he touched the horse. And there's his score, a 9.2. And the next one up, number 23, Jo Young Sam from Korea, starts his exercise on the end of the horse, fine double leg circles, changing direction, moves round from one end of the horse to the other, a slight opening of the legs, continues with his pendulum swings, slight touch of the horse there, onto the end, and finishing with a fine turn, but a slight adjustment before landing. And here we see the slow motion replay of the scissor movements, and finally his finish onto the end, then back onto the other end, and finally finishing. And there's his score, a high 9.5, very good score for that pommel exercise. And the next gymnast up from Canada is Lorne Bobkin, preparing himself for the start of the exercise. Beautiful clear double leg circles. This tall gymnast from Canada performing so far without any mistakes. And there he goes into his scissors or pendulum swings into the fine Thomas Flairs, up to handstand, and finishing off. Very, very good exercise. He'll be quite pleased with that and relieved to do the exercise without mistakes. And as we watch the replay, we see the double leg circles, changing direction, moving from one part of the horse to the other, onto the end. Back into the middle. Slight bend of the legs when he transfers from his double leg circles, and there's his final score, a 9.6. And next up, number 20 from Japan, Nikuro Keto, hitting the horse slightly on that turn in the middle, struggling a little bit to maintain the momentum, but has the necessary strength to continue and finish his exercise. Quite a good exercise, but lacking in amplitude and a little bit of fight to get the exercise completed. So we're just awaiting his score as we see the slow motion replay. And there we see him hitting the top of the handle with his legs, but still manages to continue his swing. Very difficult combination of double leg circles on one handle and immediately moving from the middle to the end. There's his score, a fine 9.4. He'll be quite pleased with that after brushing the horse with his legs. And the next gymnast up from USA is Chris Luggs. And this young gymnast has really improved. Good all-round gymnast. It's a fine change, hop change in the middle of his exercise, and finishing with very difficult legs together to handstand, and a very good exercise. He'll be quite pleased with that as he goes over and his coach congratulates him. From USA, Bob Lurks. And here we see the difficult finish on the end to continue his exercise into his pendulum swings with a half turn, preparing himself for the finish of the exercise. Fine handstand with legs together. And there's his score, a 9.625. He'll be very pleased with that very high score. And next from Australia, Tim Lees, this very tall young gymnast, showing beautiful Thomas flares and changing direction, moving from the end to the middle to the far end and straight into his double leg circles, and showing good flexibility in his scissor movements. Very good exercise, well executed, showing lots of amplitude. He'll be very pleased with that young Australian boy, Tim Lees from Australia. And here we see the Thomas flares traveling from the end to the center to the far end and back again along the horse. Very difficult combination of Thomas flare movements. Shows good style and technique. One double leg circle on one handle. Good flexibility in his scissor movements. And there's his score, very high. High so far, 9.725. Good exercise. And next up for China is Jing. And here's another fine exercise in the team and all-round competition. This young Chinese boy got the gold medal, and now he's in the final of the pommel horse and performing with good style, moving from end to end and showing magnificent flexibility and a fine handstand turn to finish. Excellent routine from Jing. And here we see this young gymnast performing this very fine, precise balance and technique in his exercise. And there's his score, a very high 9.9 to come up top on the pommel horse, winning the gold medal for China. Very, very difficult exercise. And next up for China is Jing, preparing himself, starting on the end of the pommel horse, straight into Thomas flares with travels, then double leg circles, then traveling in the double leg circle position, forward and backwards, very, very difficult. Good style, rhythm, showing good technique throughout the exercise, preparing himself for his finish, onto the end, and a fine handstand off. Very good exercise. So let's see what score he comes up with. Being congratulated by his previous competitor, scoring a 9.9. Let's see what Jing comes up with in the final mark as we watch the slow motion replay. Fine travels in the Thomas Flair position, and here we see moving up the horse, facing forwards and back up the horse again. Very difficult combination here. Just a slight opening of the legs there as we watch the slow motion. At normal speed we wouldn't probably see that. And there's the score, a high 9.8 for China. And there we see the final result, the gold medal going to Jing, China, silver, Jing, China, and Lee's of Australia coming up with the bronze medal. The next event that we'll be seeing will be the vault, and for Korea, the first competitor on the vault, doing a fine vault there, the handspring half turn in the pike position. This gymnast won the bronze medal in the Olympic Games, scoring a very high 9.55 for his first vault. The gymnast must complete two vaults, two different vaults. So let's see what he will perform for his second vault. And there we see a very fine vault, handspring half turn to layout from Park Jong-hong from Korea. Very good vault there, stood it perfectly still, and here we see the slow motion replay. Very vigorous run up, thrust off the horse, there's the pike and a half turn, and lands perfectly standing still. And there's his score, a 9.6125 for that second vault. And the next gymnast up for China, Jing, and preparing himself for his first vault. Let's see what this young Chinese gymnast, the all-round winner. And there's a new vault, a very original, a round off onto the board, followed by a back handspring and a full twist. This is the new concept in vaulting, which we're seeing for the first time in competition. A round off on the board, back handspring, a full twist and sukanhara, just a slight step forward. Otherwise, a very, very good vault, a very new and exciting vault. And there's his score, a 9.725. So he will now attempt a different vault for his second vault. The gymnasts have to do two different vaults in this final of the apparatus. And as he prepares himself, lots of concentration, and let's see what this young Chinese gymnast will do for his second attempt. There we see the same vault, only much more difficult. A double twist in the somersault, a round-off back handspring, followed by a double twist in Sukahara. And here we see the slow motion replay. It's very difficult vault, not quite landing it perfect, just 1 foot back, a slight adjustment there, but a very difficult vault, and that will be taken into consideration by the judges. And there we see the score, a 9.7125. And next up for China is Zhang Wei, attempting his first vault. And he performs the same vault, a beautiful vault there, a round off, back handspring, followed by a back somersault with a full twist in a straight position. Very good vault there. Landed it perfectly, be very happy with that. And here we see the slow motion replay, good thrust off, full twist, and lands it nice and still under full control. Gets himself set up now for his second vault, waiting the result of the first one, as we see the slow motion replay of that vault again. Very fine vault, he'll be well pleased with that, and the judges working the mark out. And there we see a 9.8, very high score there for that young Chinese gymnast on the first attempt, a 9.8. And here we see the second vault. Lands it perfectly, not so difficult, a back handspring and followed by a back somersault in the straight position. This new type of vault, doing the round off onto the springboard, is the first time being seen in competition here in China, and he'll be hoping he gets a nice high score for that second attempt. There's his coach waiting in anticipation for that result as we watch the slow motion replay. Beautiful technique and flight through the air, and lands it perfectly standing still. There we are, 9.65 for his second attempt. And the final score, 9.725. And next up, from Canada, Bobkin. His first attempt, a very strong and powerful run. Handspring half turn, followed by a pike somersault. Quite a good vault, lands it standing still, being congratulated there by his coach. And here we see the slow motion. Very difficult vault, just a little slight landing and scoring a 9.65. Now we will look at the second vault. Same thing, but in a tucked position. Lands it standing still, be quite pleased with that. There was 2 vaults without a mistake. This very tall gymnast from Canada. Handspring, half turn, and there's his score, a 9.45. So his final score, a 9.55 for the average of the 2 vaults. And there we see the final result, the gold medal to Li Jing in China, silver to China, Zhang Wei, and Lorne Bobkin of Canada getting the bronze medal. The event is the parallel bars, and first up for Canada is Lorne Bobkin, preparing himself for this exercise which requires strength, swing and flight. Very difficult combination there to start the routine. It's a very tall gymnast from Canada. Moving out to the side of the parallel bars, presses the handstand on 1 bar, back somersault to handstand, followed by another back somersault, followed by a double tuck somersault out, and just a slight step back on landing. Very good exercise. Slight slackening of the legs during the exercise, and here we see the complicated mount. Works his way into the middle of the bars, swinging, straddle, back to handstand, followed by a Healy turn, back up to handstand, another Healy turn, but lets the body tension go, works his way to the side of the parallel bars, and there's his final score, a 9.5. And the next competitor up for China, Li Ji. Back clip to handstand from a kip, followed by a long swing, full turn, very difficult movement there. Further long swing, a stutz to into the middle, a back change, swing to handstand, showing good flight, and there's a very difficult 1.5 somersaults in the middle of the parallel bars. Swings to handstand, and a double somersault out in the tuck position. Just stepping back on landing, but a very fine exercise, complicated, lots of difficulty, and there we see the very fine 1.5 forward somersaults in the middle of the bars. Continues swinging to handstand, and there's his score of 9.70, very high score for the Chinese gymnast. And the next competitor from Korea is Ju Young Sun. Kip back clip to handstand. Long swing half turn, followed by a long swing ginger. Slight adjustment, press into handstand. A Healy turn to half lever, very difficult combination. Presses to handstand. Swings down and half change back to handstand, and again followed by a very fine double somersault out, but just stepping forward slightly on landing. Very good exercise from these top gymnasts here in Samjeng, the Pacific Alliance competition, as we watch the slight mistake of the Korean gymnast doing some complicated work, and there's his score, a 9.40 for his parallel bar routine. And next up from USA is Chris Lance, starting his exercise from the side of the parallel bars. Jumps, very difficult start there, jump to planche, press to handstand. Somersault underneath the bars, back to handstand, followed by Diamidov, a Healy turn to half lever. Presses to handstand again, showing some good control, and finishing with a double pike somersault, very difficult dismount, and lands it standing perfectly still. Well pleased about that, big smile on his face. Good parallel bar exercise from this young American. And there we see the Diamidov turn, an uprise, swings back to handstand, straight into a Healy turn, and finishing with a half lever. There's his score, a 9.50, and the next one up is Holdsworth from USA. And here's Curtis Holdsworth doing a very fine Thomas flares on the end of the bars. Swings into the middle with a half turn to handstand. Swings down, half turn to handstand again. Heely turn to half lever. Presses to handstand. Preparing himself for his finish. Another further half turn and a very fine tuck somersault out, but doesn't quite make the landing and has to adjust to finish his exercise. And there's them very fine, difficult Thomas flares on the end of the bars to planche position. Somersault underneath the bars to kip. Swing to handstand, immediate half turn. And there's his score, a 9.3. He'll be disappointed with that score, not as high as he probably hoped. And the next gymnast up from China is Zhang Wei. Very fine mount there, back clip straight to handstand. Swings to the middle, 1.5 somersaults, very difficult movement there. Showing good flight and swing. A further 1.5 back somersaults in between the bars. Presses to handstand. Swing to half turn and a further swing to half turn to handstand. And a very fine, neat tuck somersault, double somersault to finish. Very happy, a big smile on his face. Zhang Wei finished his parallel bar routine, and here we see the very difficult 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position in between the bars. Very good exercise from this young Chinese gymnast. Very beautiful 1.5 back somersault, clips to half lever, and a high score of 9.70. And next up from Japan is Kai Maijai, starting his exercise in the middle of the bars. Somersault to immediate clips, turning and handstand, further turn, followed by a very difficult combination which gets him into slight trouble there, hitting the bars with his legs, but manages to maintain the momentum to continue his exercise. Presses to handstand, good style. Swing and half turn to handstand, followed by immediate double back somersault in the tuck position to land still, finishing his exercise. A little disappointed there. Very difficult combination in the middle there, which didn't come off quite as he expected. And here we see it again, just catching his legs on the parallel bars, which will cost him points in his final score. And there's his score, a 9.2, so obviously losing some tenths of a point there for his touching the parallel bars. And there's the final result. Li Jing of China, the gold medal. Zhang Wei, the silver medal. And Lorne Bobkin, the bronze medal. This is the most spectacular piece of apparatus for men's gymnastics. And here we see the Chinese gymnast doing a beautiful release and catch, a 1.5 somersaults over the top of the bar. An endo is straddled in now to handstand, followed by a catch-off and a ginger. Fine combination there of release movements, straight into his L-grip swings, and preparing himself for his final gymnastic element, a double twist and double somersault to finish. Very fine routine there, from this young gymnast, Jing. And here we see the slow motion replay. Very original movement there, 1.5 somersaults in the pike position. The gymnasts have to show movements close to the bar and away from the bar, and some very, very difficult release catch movements. This very young, exciting gymnast from China. I'm sure we're going to hear more of this young gymnast in the future competitions around the world. And there's the very difficult double twist, double somersault finish. And there's his score, a 9.850. Very, very high score for the young Chinese boy. And next up, from Japan, is Kai Imanishi, performing some very, very good difficult movements on the bar. There's a very fine flying over the top of the bar in the straight position, and continuing his exercise in the L grip position. And let's see what his finish is. A double somersault in the straight position and lands perfectly still. Very fine exercise from this new young Japanese gymnast, Kai Imanishi, being congratulated by his coach. And here we see the slow motion replay of that very beautiful flying movement over the top of the bar in the straight position. And now straight into the swinging movements where his back is facing the bar, a little too wide in that grasp there, but must be thinking about his final movement. And there's his score, a 9.625. And the next gymnast up for Canada is David Barbanda. Starts with a fine L grip. Slight mistake there on that release catch will cost him lots of points in the final score. Slight stop there, but manages to continue his exercise. Long swing, a full turn in the one arm position, further long swing on one arm, preparing himself for that dismount, which is a double back somersault with a full twist. He'll be very disappointed with that score there. Bardana from Canada, this young gymnast who had 1 or 2 mistakes during that gymnastic exercise. And there we see the mistake there, the release catch movement not quite going as planned, but manages to continue. Another slight hesitation. Very difficult exercise. And here we see the full turn on one arm, straight in the forward long swings to endo, one arm long swing, and just his finish to complete the exercise, the full twist in the double somersault. And there's his score, a 9.05. And the next gymnast up from USA is young Chris Lurks. Straight into one arm long swings. And now his release, misses the bar. Not injured, hopefully. Big smile, realizing that the release movement was too early, which took him away from the bar. Just touching the bar, couldn't quite catch it. He has 30 seconds to prepare himself to continue his exercise again. And he will lose half a point for the fall when he missed the bar on that somersault catch. Continues his exercise, kip to handstand, full turn round one arm, half turn, and only his finish now to complete the exercise, a double somersault with a full twist and a slight adjustment on landing. He's quite happy about it, but I'm sure he won't expect a very high score for this exercise. And here we see the slow motion replay of the full turn round one arm and his preparation before his dismount. Good style throughout his dismount, but doesn't quite land it as though he would like to. I'm just awaiting his score, and everybody enjoying that, knowing he hasn't hurt himself on that landing. And there's his score, a very low 8.9 for that high bar routine. And next up is Matsunaga of Japan, being lifted onto the bar by his coach. Starts his exercise with a Kasta handstand, immediate straddle in an outer handstand, a fine back straddle, a catch-off, followed by a ginger, a somersault with a half turn, into long swings in the rotated grasp, and finishing with a triple somersault off and lands it perfectly. The young Japanese girls there,
without any fans in the game.
Jim has completed his triple somersault off the bar and lands it perfectly. Very good exercise from the Japanese Matsunaga as we watch the slow motion replay of the back straddle to re-grasp the bar, followed by a further somersault with a half turn and straight into his long swings in rotated grasp, half turn, and only his dismount to complete a very fine exercise. Very high triple somersault, just a slight adjustment on landing, and the score is 9.750. Very high score for that young Japanese gymnast. And the next up for China is Jing. Let's see what the young Chinese gymnast can produce on this very exciting piece of apparatus, the horizontal bar. One arm long swing with a half turn. Getting ready for his release movement, which is a catch-off with the legs together, followed by a very high ginger. There's his two difficult release movements, a one-arm long swing with a full turn, further half turn, and only his dismount now to complete a very fine exercise. Double back somersault in a straight position, and has one or two steps back on landing, which will cost him a little in this final score. Leads
Frustration.
China. So as we await the score for Li Ji, we see the slow motion replay of the finish. A beautiful dismount, very high, good style. Only when he lands he has to adjust by one or two steps to stand in the perfect position. For Canada is Chuck Basia, this young, tall gymnast, completing a very difficult release movement there of 1.5 twists, recatching the bar, fine one-arm long swings, further half turn in a one-arm long swing, endo, a straddle in and out to handstand, and only his finish to complete the exercise, a double straight somersault, and lands it perfectly still. Very good exercise from this young gymnast from Canada, Chuck Basia. And here we see the slow motion of that very difficult release movement A ginger, 1.5 twists to recatch the bar. Continues his exercise into long swings, further long swing and another long swing on one arm, a half turn on one arm, and only his finish to complete the exercise. And here we see that fine dismount and lands it perfectly still. And the next gymnast up for Australia,
Won both of them. So they'll start it off.
Mumson, being lifted on by his coach, Warwick Forbes from Australia. Long swing half turn, preparing himself for his catch-off movement. Oh, doesn't quite catch the bar, releases, that will lose him half a point. He now has 30 seconds to chalk up again and continue his exercise. There's his coach trying to console him. And here we see the slow motion replay of that mistake where he doesn't quite catch the bar to continue his exercise. Taking his time, using the full 30 seconds up. And here he goes with the rest of his exercise. Straight into a long swing, catch off, followed by another catch off. So there you go, showing he can do that movement, completing the exercise twice, the one which he fell off, into the L-grip position, and only his finish now to complete his exercise, a double somersault with a full turn in the tuck position and lands it perfectly standing still. He'll be a little disappointed knowing that he can do that gymnastic element. 2 consecutive catch-offs, but his first attempt releasing and having that mistake that will cost him in his final score. So as we watch the slow motion replay, the second half of his exercise, there we see the very difficult and complicated swings and the double somersault, full twist in the tuck position. There's his score, a low 8.9. He won't be very happy with that. And the final result of the competition, Li Jing of China winning the